The house was silent in a way that felt cruel. Claire Bennett sat curled in the corner of the sectional couch, legs tucked beneath her, a half-full mug of tea gone cold in her hand. Rain tapped rhythmically against the living room windows, the gray afternoon light filtering through sheer curtains, casting pale shadows on the walls. It had been 6 days since Mark's funeral, but grief didn't seem to arrive in the form she had expected. It was quieter, heavier, like a presence rather than a feeling. She hadn't cried since the burial. Instead, Claire moved through the days as if walking underwater, slow, disoriented, with a perpetual pressure on her chest. She was 52 but felt 100. The mirrors in the house had become strangers. Her reflection always seemed older, brittle somehow, her green eyes dulled by years of unspoken disappointments. She wasn't mourning a perfect man. Mark had been her husband for nearly 30 years. Reliable, respected, methodical. He was the sort of man who mowed the lawn with geometric precision and balanced the checkbook down to the cent. But he had loved her the way someone loves a routine, with no warmth, only obligation. Their conversations, especially in the final decade, had been reduced to logistical exchanges: bills, groceries, schedules. Intimacy had vanished long before illness crept in. Claire often wondered when they had stopped touching. Not physically, although that too, but emotionally. When had she become invisible to the man she'd once given everything to? She exhaled and set the mug down. The silence pressed closer. Even the fridge seemed to hum louder in the absence of human voices. Ryan had stayed 2 days after the funeral but left for Boston, citing work deadlines and a dog to feed. He hadn't noticed her quiet withdrawal. Or maybe he had and chose not to. Then there had been Ethan. She hadn't expected him at the funeral. Her son's best friend since high school, Ethan Carter, had been a fixture in their lives for a while. Always polite, unusually quiet for a teenage boy. After college, he drifted from their day-to-day, only showing up for the occasional barbecue or Christmas card. But there he was, dressed in a black suit too big for his frame, standing at the back of the cemetery, hands clasped respectfully. Claire remembered locking eyes with him during the service. His gaze didn't offer the empty condolences others did. It held something else. Recognition, perhaps. Or concern. She hadn't thought much of it. Until today. A knock jolted her out of her thoughts. Claire straightened, momentarily startled. The sound was hesitant, like someone unsure whether to disturb her. She walked to the front door, fingers smoothing her sweater, and opened it. Ethan stood there, rain clinging to the shoulders of his jacket, dark curls wet and tousled. He looked taller than she remembered, broader. His eyes were the same though, warm, unreadable. "I hope this isn't weird," he said quickly, voice low. "I was driving by, thought I'd check on you." Claire blinked, unsure how to respond. The gesture was kind, thoughtful, even, but unexpected. "Of course," she said after a pause, stepping aside. "Come in. It's miserable out." He nodded, brushing past her into the hallway. He smelled like rain and something clean, like cedar and soap. She watched as he removed his jacket, water pooling slightly on the entry mat. "I didn't mean to intrude," he added as they walked toward the kitchen. "You've probably had enough visitors." She gave a humorless smile. "They stopped coming 3 days ago. Death is only interesting until it's inconvenient." He didn't laugh, but he did nod in understanding. She poured him a cup of tea without asking and handed it to him. He took it, his fingers brushing hers, a small contact, but enough to send a flicker of something through her skin. They sat across from each other, at the kitchen table. The hum of the rain grew louder. "I wanted to come to the wake," he said after a moment. "But I didn't know if it would be appropriate." Ryan wasn't sure how things were. Claire glanced at him. "You mean how my marriage really was?" He hesitated. "That's not what I meant, but it's what you wondered." Her tone wasn't angry, just tired. Honest. He didn't deny it. Instead, he looked down into his tea. "I always thought you seemed lonely, even when we were teenagers." Mark didn't talk much. Claire felt her throat tighten. It was a strange relief to be seen. "I was lonely," she said softly. "Still am." The rain whispered against the windows like a secret trying to be heard. Silence fell again, but this one wasn't painful, it was full. Thick with things unspoken. "You know," she said, trying to shake it off, "I don't think I've had a real conversation in weeks." He looked up, his expression open and serious. "Then let's change that." For the next hour, they spoke, not about Mark or funerals or what was expected, but about everything else. Books, travel, music. Ethan talked about his art projects. Claire spoke of the garden she used to tend before Mark's illness consumed her time. The conversation flowed like water breaking through a dam. It wasn't flirtatious. Not yet. But it was intimate in a way she hadn't known in years. When Ethan finally rose to leave, the sun had set. He turned at the door, jacket in hand. "I meant what I said. If you ever need someone to talk to." Claire looked at him, really looked. A man, not a boy. A pair of eyes that didn't just look at her, but saw her. "I'll keep that in mind," she said. He nodded, then paused. Just before opening the door, he turned again, this time without words. He simply looked at her. A long, quiet moment. Then he raised his hand, a subtle gesture that felt almost like a promise, and stepped into the night. Claire closed the door slowly. Her hand lingered on the knob as the silence returned, now changed. It no longer felt empty, but filled with something waiting to unfold. Claire wasn't sure when Ethan's visits became part of her routine. At first, they were occasional, an hour of conversation here, a cup of tea there. But soon, days felt incomplete without him. He didn't call in advance anymore. He didn't need to. His presence had folded itself into the fabric of her life with such quiet insistence that she never questioned it. They never talked about Mark. That silence was mutual and strangely comforting. It was as if his absence had created a new space, and Ethan had stepped into it, not as a replacement, but as a witness to the life Claire hadn't known how to express. On a Wednesday in late October, Claire found herself baking. She hadn't baked in years. Flour dusted the counters, and cinnamon hung in the air as she slid a tray of cookies into the oven. When Ethan knocked, right on cue, she wasn't surprised. "You always bring the weather with you," she said as he stepped in, drops of rain clinging to his shoulders. He smiled. "Wouldn't be me without a storm." She handed him a towel and pointed toward the hall. "You know where Ryan's old room is. Grab something dry." He returned a few minutes later in one of Ryan's old sweatshirts. It was too tight in the shoulders, and Claire noticed the way the fabric stretched across his chest, how the dampness darkened his curls. "You look different," she said before she could stop herself. He shrugged. "Guess I'm not 17 anymore." They sat on the couch with a fire burning low and music playing softly in the background. The cookies sat untouched on a plate between them. Claire watched the flames, trying to ignore how close Ethan's knee was to hers. "I used to come here just to escape my house," Ethan said suddenly. "My parents fought all the time. Ryan never knew, but sometimes I just didn't want to go home." Claire looked at him, surprised. "You never said anything." "I didn't need to. You were the only person who ever really noticed me. You'd ask how I was, not just to be polite, but like you actually cared." "I did care," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Their eyes met, and something unspoken pressed against the moment, fragile and electric. "I used to imagine what it would be like to talk to you," Ethan continued. "Really talk. Not just as Ryan's friend, but as me. And you." Claire's breath caught. Her instinct was to retreat, to close herself off like she always had. But she didn't. Not this time. "You shouldn't say things like that," she murmured. "Why not?" "Because it's wrong." "Is it?" he asked gently. "Or is it just unexpected?" She had no answer. Her fingers gripped the edge of her teacup, knuckles pale. "I'm 24, Claire. I know that sounds young to you. But I'm not a child." "No," she agreed softly. "You're not." Silence settled again, but it was different this time. Denser, charged. Claire stood, pacing toward the window. Rain slid down the glass in delicate rivulets. "You have no idea what this would mean," she said, not turning around. "I'm not just older, I'm Ryan's mother. You're his best friend." "I know. Then why are you here?" His voice was steady behind her. Because I think you're the loneliest person I've ever met. And because I think you've been pretending to be okay for far too long. Claire closed her eyes. That truth, spoken aloud, struck deeper than she expected. She turned to face him. You should go. Ethan didn't move. Please, she said, but the plea was thin, uncertain. He stood slowly, stepped toward her, and paused just inches away. I'll go, he said. But only if you look me in the eye and tell me you feel nothing.
She didn't speak.
He leaned in, not to kiss her, not yet, but to rest his forehead gently against hers. The contact was soft, but it broke something open inside her. Years of silence, of being touched without feeling, spoken to without meaning, came crashing to the surface. She reached up, almost against her will, and touched his cheek. Ethan, I'm here, he said. You don't have to say anything else. The first kiss was tentative, like a question. She answered it by stepping closer, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt. His hands remained respectful, barely resting on her waist, as if giving her space to change her mind. But she didn't. The kiss deepened, not lustful, but aching, desperate in its emotional honesty. It wasn't about sex. Not yet. It was about being seen. When they pulled apart, Claire looked at him, her breath shallow. This can't happen, she whispered. It already has, Ethan replied. They stood in the dim light, neither moving. Outside, the rain continued, unrelenting. Inside, something irreversible had taken root.
Claire didn't ask him to stay. She didn't need to.
He simply followed her down the hall, their fingers brushing like a promise.
She knew the choice she was making.
She knew it would have consequences. But for the first time in years, she felt like she belonged in her own skin. The soft gray light spilled through the bedroom curtains, brushing against Claire's bare shoulder. She lay still, listening to the rhythmic sound of her own breathing and Ethan's, steady beside her. His arm was draped lightly across her waist, his skin warm against hers. For a moment it felt like peace.
But it didn't last.
Reality settled in like dust, slow, suffocating, inescapable. Claire eased herself from beneath his arm and stood, wrapping herself in her robe. The hardwood floor was cool beneath her feet as she moved toward the window. From this angle, the yard looked ordinary, deceptively so. The garden beds still lay untended, the leaves were beginning to fall, and the porch swing moved slightly in the breeze. Nothing about the outside world hinted at what had changed inside the walls of her home. Behind her, Ethan stirred. She could feel him watching her before she turned. You regret it already, he said quietly. Claire didn't respond. She wasn't ready for the honesty that hung in his voice like morning fog. Instead, she walked to the kitchen and began boiling water for tea. She moved by habit, retrieving cups, measuring leaves, watching steam rise, as if the familiar rhythm could anchor her. Ethan appeared moments later, now dressed, his hair still mussed. I didn't come here last night to complicate your life, he said, gently but firmly. You didn't have to, Claire replied. It was already complicated. He sat down at the table, resting his elbows on the surface. Talk to me, Claire. Please. She placed his cup in front of him, her hands trembling slightly. This, whatever it is between us, it doesn't just affect me. Or you. It affects Ryan. It colors everything. Ethan nodded. I know. But do you think it was wrong? She looked at him then, really looked. There was no shame in his eyes. Only something deeper, an unwavering concern. A tenderness she had long since forgotten existed. I think it was human, she said finally. But the world doesn't have patience for human mistakes. He leaned forward. What if it wasn't a mistake? Her breath caught. That question, it was too generous, too kind. And yet, it hung there, demanding a response. I don't know what it was, she admitted. Comfort. Connection. Desperation. Maybe all three. Ethan sat back in silence. I'm not 24, Ethan, she added. I'm 52. I have a grown son. A mortgage. A reputation in this neighborhood. People know me as a widow, not a woman. If they found out... Claire, he interrupted, voice firm, I don't care what people think.
But I do, she snapped.
Then her tone softened. I have to. The room fell quiet, save for the quiet clinking of her spoon against porcelain. After a long pause, Ethan spoke again. What happens now? Claire didn't answer immediately. Her mind spun with what-ifs and imagined headlines, with the weight of judgment and the fear of Ryan's face if he ever learned the truth. She wanted to freeze the night, to keep it separate from daylight. You should go, she said gently. He nodded slowly. And will I see you again? She met his eyes. I don't know. He stood, walked to her, and kissed her forehead. Not a lover's kiss, but a farewell. A soft, reverent goodbye. I meant what I said, he whispered. You don't have to pretend anymore. Then he left. Claire stood at the doorway long after his car disappeared down the road. The house felt impossibly still again, but this silence was different from the one after Mark's death. This one was raw, restless,
Alive.
Later that afternoon, Claire sat on the back porch, a blanket draped over her lap, watching the wind scatter leaves across the lawn. Her phone buzzed beside her. A message from Ryan. Hey, just checking in. How are you holding up, Mom? Want me to visit this weekend? She stared at the screen, thumbs hovering over the keyboard. I'm okay, she typed. No need to come. Just focus on work. I love you.
She deleted the last line.
Then retyped it. Then deleted it again. Finally, she just sent. I'm okay. It was the safest version of the truth she could offer. As the sun dipped below the trees, Claire closed her eyes and let the wind lift her hair from her face. There was no neat ending. No moral conclusion. Only the quiet knowledge that, for one night, she had been touched by something real, and that she would carry it forward like a secret folded inside her heart. She wasn't the same woman who sat alone after Mark's funeral. She wasn't entirely sure who she was now. But she knew this. The silence no longer frightened her. It reminded her she was still alive.